Hey, everybody. It's Adelia here on the Vicky Girl Travels the World YouTube channel. One of the things I have always loved doing with this channel is talking to Black women who are making the most of their lives. I'm all about defying convention, embracing adventure, and regretting nothing. And over the last 5 years, I have talked to numerous Black women who are out there doing that, living life on their terms. My guest today is a author, writer, just all around creative, what do you call it? Creative Renaissance woman. And I think y'all are going to really enjoy this conversation. Um, so here we go. Appreciate you reaching out because this is one of those topics that Ivana and I, through our retreat business, this has been it's like one of the pillars of what we do with Reclaim. So a chance to talk to you and a chance to talk to you about this and get caught up on your life. I was all for it. Now, for the folks who are watching this, they're probably looking at you and they're like, she looks familiar. Yes, you are correct. Keturah has been on the channel twice. Her first appearance, oh gosh, was that 2021?
Was it? That would have been after Panini, after there was vintage
Yeah,
COVID, right?
I feel like it was 2021, and we were talking about, uh, choicefully choosing a life and being a ungovernable woman, and still one of my most favorite conversations of all time.
Same,
And
same.
you were back here, and I loved the book that you put together with the advice for young folks, because low key, there was plenty of advice for those of us who are a bit more senior. So, yes, if you're looking and you're thinking, she's been here before, you are correct. So, you already know this is going to be a good conversation. You already know that.
No
Now,
pressure.
part of the reason you got on my radar is because you used to live in China. You've lived abroad. I have lived abroad. I have lived in China. So to start out our conversation today, let's talk a little bit about your journey living outside of the US.
That's a great place to start. And I kind of feel like the last 10 years, I just turned 50 2 months ago, June 4th. And I feel like my whole decade of the 40s can be labeled my global citizen years because I left the US for the first time on the cusp of 40 and then spent 5 years living abroad, first in Rwanda in East Africa, then moved to Shanghai, China. Went back to the US for a few years. And then, of course, I'm sure we can talk to this later. I'm now living in Europe. But that whole entire early part of my 40s, when I took my first stint at living abroad life, I look at that now as 5 years of incredible discomfort, growth, joy, like an opening up of what the world was like and what my way of being would be like as a woman who was sort of at the beginning stages of of midlife and who's now solidly in midlife. And I've been asked this question in all the interviews I've done over the last 5 to 6 years of what sort of was the impetus for me to move to Rwanda. Because I think people in their head don't associate, they don't understand that when they hear Rwanda and they think of Hotel Rwanda, that was literally like 30 years ago. So so their thought is, oh my goodness, you went to Rwanda, and they have in their mind you were in the middle of of the Civil War, right? So the questions has always been, what made you decide to move, then Rwanda, then to China? And I don't quite know if I still have an appropriate answer. And I think what I've come to after now having been a decade, have spent a decade as a traveler, a serial expat, I've seen a commonality in many of us who take on this life. It's just a genuine curiosity about people and the world. I know with the current climate in the States, a lot of people sort of just assume you're running from the demon, and it's not like I'm happy about what's happening back there, but even before the demon was in office, I was still on this journey to just explore the world. And in this decade or so of moving to two different countries, coming back to my own, then leaving again, there has been a level of acceptance that I will never be the woman who does what she's supposed to do.
You
Who
just
wants
now figuring that out? I've known you for 5 minutes and I knew that.
it's every now and then I'm just like, oh yeah, that's right. This is why I'm here. Once again. I would never want what I'm supposed to want. I will never do what I'm supposed to do. And I'm better now, a scotch closer to full acceptance of that.
I'm teasing you because there are things that I discover about myself, and I have a roommate now. We've been living together almost 2 years, and I will say these things out loud, and she'll be like, "Duh, like you didn't know that."
Like,
So
girl, for
I
real?
I, I get it, but sometimes it just takes a little longer for all the pieces to connect.
Yeah. Sometimes you forget.
So, you are now again abroad. Now, can I ask a little bit about why you returned to the US and then subsequently, what were your reasons for leaving?
That's another good question. So I returned to the US in 2019, largely because, again, I had to come to accept something about myself that I wasn't aware enough of when I left to be able to acknowledge. My leaving the US on the cusp of 40, which would have been the year 2014 for me, was kind of scattered and random as hell. And when I reflect on it now, it was largely connected to the death of my father, who had passed away a year or so before. And not in a way that was overt or even in a way of I'm reacting to this and I'm running from this. It was just a realization that if I don't have a major shift in my life, I will end up having not really done anything of merit. I don't want to shit on my father because he sacrificed a lot to be able to take care of 4 children and an ex-wife, in a sense. But realizing he did what he was supposed to do, and this is all he got for it. Like, he left me and my siblings a little bit of money, but for the most part, I was like, I kind of wish he had just gone and done what I'm doing now, and lived his life, enjoy and explore the world, right? So I realized in 2019, before I came back to the US, I enjoyed living abroad. Like, when I lived in Rwanda, I visited about 16 African nations in those 2 years I was there. By the time I got to China, I was exhausted from being in airports. So I only went to like maybe 5 or 6 Asian countries in the time I was in China. So I enjoyed exploring the world. I enjoyed making friends and building a family of choice, literally in both countries. I have a global family at this point. But I wasn't intentional in making my choice. I was just like, let's see what's happening. Let's see what's going to happen out here. I wanted to go to West Africa, but I took a job in East Africa. I kind of wanted to go and live in Bali, but the pay scale in international schools was sucked in Bali, so I just went to China. So it wasn't my choosing the place. It was my choosing this adventure called expat life and travel. When it was time for me to decide if I was going to continue my journey in Shanghai, I realized I had done my field of China. It was a positive experience, but not my forever home, clearly. And just randomly packing up and moving to wherever the next job contract went didn't make sense. I was like, what is the purpose of this? And I was also clear that a long-term life outside of the US was going to be my destiny. So when I returned back to, I tell people all the time, I didn't go back to the United States. I moved back to New York.
I understand that completely.
The love of my life. I love New York City. I moved back to New York with the explicit purpose of being more intentional and doing more research, all of the many online platforms like yours, to explore countries, to sort of make this list of what did I want, what was going to best meet my needs, and then do slow travel. And as much as my schedule, both my work, creative writing schedule, my life schedule would allow, try to do long stays in different countries. So from 2019 until I moved here a few months ago, every year I would pick a place. I would go stay there for a month or two. And then when I got to Portugal last year, I was like, so this it. Ain't no
I
need to
remember
go to
seeing your
Belize.
post.
Ain't no need to go to Belize. Ain't no need to go to Costa Rica. I done found the one. I'm gonna put a ring on it, right? So it was this decision to choose the place and leaning into being more courageous and believing that when I chose the place, my ability to sustain myself in that place would follow. Because I was clear when I came back to the love of my life, New York City, in 2019, that the next time I left the US, it was likely going to be a permanent leave. And unless things go really left here, who knows what the future holds, right? Unless things go really left here, this feels like it. So I wanted to be more intentional because I was like, the next time I do this, it is probably going to be my resting place, my final resting place. So I want to make sure it's somewhere that I truly want to be and not just this random, let me see what happens here.
It is interesting that when I asked you to talk about your time abroad, your journey abroad, the first word that came out of your mouth was discomfort. And then you said joy and growth. Why discomfort?
I think no matter how open you believe yourself to be, no matter how cultured, I mean, I spent my entire adult life in New York City where you truly have all seven continents within your reach, right? So I considered myself well read, well traveled, a humanist in my very well way of being. So you think that that means that you are going to be able to shift and make the adjustments and not be judgmental, not be that American, right? In this foreign land. And then you find out that your ass is the most American of any American that has ever Americaned because it's who you are. Um, and you have to accept that what I had spent 40 years building this life. I had spent 20 of those 40 years pouring into a family of choice in New York City. Like literally one of my closest friends, I was still in regular connection with in New York, and we moved to New York together 20 years prior, right? Literally moved there 2 months before September 11th and was like, wow, welcome to New York, and stayed there. And we were broke as hell together in this little apartment in New York City that had too many mice. So, and then from that came a bunch of other Black creatives in Brooklyn and writers and artists. And I had spent 20 years pouring into that and developing that family of choice. I had a comfortable career doing work that I enjoyed. And then I left all that to start over as a 40-year-old. And I think really underestimated. Well, it was a great privilege, and like I said, it called me to an incredible level of growing. And clearly, I don't regret it because I did it 2 more times after that. But I underestimated what that meant and how that would cause more turmoil than just joy and excitement all the time. That there would be a level of turmoil involved in that, and a level of work to recreate your life in this foreign land. And I think as many Black Americans don't even realize that they get to, especially the continent of Africa, all these expectations that you have of what it's going to be like to be home. And that is another layer of discomfort and disappointment in some ways, because your mind and your reality isn't reflecting what your mind dreamt up about what it'd be like to be in a place where you are not the other, but you're the.
Well, I wanted to get your take on that because one of the criticisms that I get and other people who make content about their lives outside the US is that we often push this narrative that everything is great and it's perfect and there are no problems. And I, like I said, the fact that you said discomfort and the way in which you speak about it, that's exactly what it is. You're not somebody who chooses to do this if you're not somebody who is open and can keep your knees bent and roll with the punches. But also, it is not going, it is, I think it's ridiculous to think me, this Black American woman, is going to move to this other country, whether there are Black people there or not, and that it's all just going to be a perfect, I'm the missing piece to that jigsaw puzzle, you know? So that's why I wanted to hear your take on that. But again, I don't lead with, oh, I had to spend 4 hours at immigration because the life I have, that's just a part of it and that's completely worth it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are those bumps, the when the reality does not live up to or does not match your preconceived ideas. Like it's a whole thing you got to work through um and own if you're going to be able to successfully live there.
Most definitely. And
Now,
I think a part of why content creators don't lead with that is the same reason why anytime you're using social media to further a brand or as a business in a sense, um, especially since a lot of social media businesses are based on some sort of identity or personal experience, right? For people who truck in the relationship sort of coupledom brand, they don't necessarily lead with descriptive details about the fight they have with their husband and how they almost called the lawyer. And if they do, it's a very succinct one to get back to the point of, but we kept the marriage together because we believe in this institution. So I think the same goes for any social media creation. Like one of my brands is being happily single and child free. Like I understand that it's one income.
that
Which
part.
and the tax code is not written for me anywhere in the fucking world, if we being honest. Like all over the world, the tax code is not in my favor. But we all know that. And my point is not to get women to start considering maybe you should work harder not to be single. My point is, in spite of all of that, this still is an incredible choice for me. This is a life that is actually more tailored for me. And I'm not upset. I'm resentful that there are obstacles, but I'm not looking at those obstacles in order to say, I wish I was not this way. So I think that's just the reality of it. Like if my point is to have Black women approach a platform to let them know that if you so choose to want to live abroad, you can do that and be happy with it because I have. So I'm not going to spend an inordinate amount of time. And it's boring too, talking about 5 hours at immigration. Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah, like that's just how it is. And so I've accepted that. So I don't even focus on that.
Yeah.
You mentioned being very intentional or being intentional about this move. And that as your schedule allowed, we're traveling to different places. How did you put together that list of places? Because I imagine it was intentional that you weren't just like, who's got the cheapest flight?
Like I was when I was living abroad. That's often how I went on vacation. Like,
Oh,
what's the cheapest flight? Let me go.
same here. So I know that life.
China and it was it called Sea Trip? Was that the platform in China?
Oh,
Ooh, the Sea
yes,
Trip
sea
deal.
trip.
Um, out here in these expat streets, especially Black expat streets. There are common countries that you keep hearing coming up in real life get-togethers and all of the many different social media groups. Like I always joke, if you're trying to figure out what it's like to be black, just go to Facebook and put black people in and insert the country. You're gonna come up with something. Black people in this country, black women in this city. Um, so in the years that I was living abroad, in the years that when I came back to be more intentional, I just stayed in touch with, again, the community I had established in real life in different countries, and also the online community I had formed bonds with, even though there are many people that I had met in real life. And Panama came up quite frequently. Of course, Mexico, and I think because Mexico is such a big country, I looked at certain parts, like certain cities in Mexico kept coming up. Playa, of course, Mexico City. And Portugal was one that came up. Then you had the standard Central and South American countries like, Costa Rica and Belize. So it really was a combination of looking at what came up and why the word on the street was these countries were ideal, especially for someone of a certain age who is still too young to retire, but is moving towards that. So of course, the financial sustainability of it was a big part of it. So it was paying attention to that. And then, of course, doing a little bit of Googling on my own to get more specific information. And also keeping in mind that unlike the last time I went abroad, being very aware that since this next time felt like it was going to be my forever home, it needed to be somewhere that the people my family of origin, and also my family of choice back in New York City would be able to access. I enjoyed living on the continent of Africa, but I knew it was going to be a hard sell if I was living there permanently for most people I love to come, right? So I knew it had to be either a South or Central American country or a European country, because in a lot of people's minds, especially my family of origin, they're not as well traveled as my family of choice in New York City. And my family of origin's mind, European countries, so the whole continent of Europe is more equivalent or more developed or more, accessible than a Southeast Asian country or an African nation. So I kept all of that in mind when I was making my list.
Okay. And what was it about Lisbon? Or was it Portugal? Or was it Lisbon?
It was Lisbon, girl. Also,
Okay.
I will say this. When I was here on my scouting mission last year, I tried to get out to several different spots. And Portugal itself is a beautiful, beautiful country. Like, it's almost unreal to me, because since I've been here now for maybe close to 4 months, I've explored outside of Lisbon a little bit, and I've been here now as a resident instead of a tourist, and I'm still just often awed at the beautiful simplicity of Portugal. The architecture, the colors, the structure of it, the geography of it, the natural resources are just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. But I'm a city girl. I lived in New York City since I was 26 years old. I'm from the blackety black city of New Orleans. So I don't foresee ever finding it quaint and cute to be off somewhere in this rural little village, whether that village is in upstate New York or Portugal. I ain't trying to be in no village. I'll go for a weekend. The weekend away out in some remote area with my homies, but I ain't trying to live there. Again, I am single by choice, which means there's a very good chance I will remain at least not legally tied to someone until I close my eyes. And as the Bible says, God called me home, right? So I'm gonna need to be somewhere where an ambulance can come quickly. That my neighbor gonna be like, what happened to that lady? We haven't seen her in a while. I need to be around the people. And I also need resources. So aside from the practicality of just when you are a woman who is who lives alone, and whose life is structured around herself, you want to be in a highly populous environment, because that's where all the resources tend to be: medical, entertainment, all of that stuff. And I like cities for the same reason why I left the cool city of New Orleans, moved to the big city of New York City. I like the fact that cities tend to attract a high variety of different types of people. So there's more internationalism. There's more chance for me to expand my global citizenry by meeting and connecting with in meaningful ways. So people who are all over the world from different backgrounds, different mindsets, different perspectives. Cities tend to have a more robust art and culture scene, again, from all the people from all over the world who live in it. It's often more food choices, higher, better food choices. There are things to do. The public transit system tends to be more reliable in the major cities than somewhere not. So I knew for a fact when I put Portugal on the list, I would do my scouting. My home base in my scouting trip last year would be Lisbon, because that was probably where I was going to be, because that would be my home base. I didn't mind going to exploring Porto and Evora and Sintra, but it was going to be Lisbon. And I think for a lot of Black folk too, the major cities is where all the Black folk tend to be, from all across the diaspora as well.
So you got there and you were just like,
It's the one.
yeah, okay. Because I didn't want to sound, I don't know if the word is contrite, but people often will ask me, how did I pick Mexico City? And technically, I didn't. Mexico City, this was all an accident, because I was living in Honduras, and in anticipation of the second year of my contract and where I would go, because when I left the US, my intention was never to return. So I had decided I wanted to stay in Latin America. I'm doing my Googles, I'm doing my work, my searching, and I decide it gets narrowed down to Medellin or Mexico City. I had been to neither. And so I had a little window, like 4 days, 5 days in my travels for that summer, and was like, I'll check out one then. And then sometime in the fall on a school break or whatever, I'll check out the other. As it worked out, the Mexico City ticket was cheaper and worked better with my existing travel plans. I buy that ticket. This is at least a year off move. And then my employer restructures and is like, hey, we need you to do the job of two or three people for the same money you already doing. And I
No,
one
no,
of the
thank you.
reasons I left was because I wanted to create a work life that allowed me to have a life. And I remember thinking to myself, if you say yes to this, what was the point of doing all this? And I was like, no, thank you. And because they did this after hiring season.
Mm,
And
exactly.
so
It
I,
was incredibly intentional. They did it on purpose.
oh, yes, yes. I was the last person that got like, oh, here, this is what we want you to do next year. So I was like, okay, I see how y'all roll. Um, and because it was after hiring season, yes, I probably could have found another job, but I'd been working since I was 15. I didn't want to jump through the hoops. So I was like, huh, maybe I'm now moving to Mexico City. And that little trip is now going to be me finding neighborhoods so I can look for apartments. So, and when I got here, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. And it's often a hard thing to explain, and you don't want to hear people say, well, when you know, but there is some truth there.
It really is like when people ask me why Portugal, and because especially since when I made a decision, although I had been telling my closest friends since I had returned to New York, I'm going to this particular part of the world for a reason to scout it out. And then when I came back from Portugal last year and said this is the one I'm gonna start working towards moving, everybody was still like, when I said my visa got approved, my going away party is next week. They're like, what? I'm not ready, and how come, and why? And I was like, I didn't told you I don't have a. I said, listen, why you married your husband and not that other dude? The other dude was cool. The one you was dating before him was cool. He had a good job. He treated you real good, but for some reason he wasn't the one. You met your husband. He had all the same things the last dude did, but it was vibes. It was just some vibes. Y'all had chemistry, so then you married that one.
Pretty much, pretty much. But and every move doesn't have to be that way. but you were intentionally looking for that. And I am mentioning that because there's probably somebody watching this who is very much in that place where they're like, I can't find my perfect place. I moved to Tegucigalpa, Honduras, which had just been declared the either the number one or number two murder capital of the world. Like, I knew that was not my forever home, but I needed to go. And so every move is not a forever move.
And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. It'll be fine. No one will die. You may not have the best time, but you won't have the worst time either. It'll be fine. It's a transition.
So what are you doing in Portugal? Because you mentioned you are not at the typical retirement age. And a question I get all the time, I had a client call yesterday. Mind you, I got home at no, not yesterday. See, I don't even know what day it is. Friday. I got home at 2:30 a.m. and I had a client call at noon. Um, and she was concerned with like, I want to go, but I need to make money. So this is like an obligatory question that I have to ask you.
Of course, in a very valid way. And I'm glad you asked it because, whoo, child, that's a story. That is
Let's
a
hear
story.
it.
Now, listen, how much time you got? I'm going to try to make this quick. So I originally came over on the D8 digital nomad visa from about December of last year until about March or April of this year. I was in ongoing intensive conversations with the nonprofit organization I work for to be able to become, the role I had was hybrid. I created training content and led workshops for young adults who were contributing service in public schools in New York City. So I had been in many meetings with supervisors who were excited about the opportunity to transition me and to see how we could make that work. I talked to almost everybody at this organization. At one point, I was talking to the vice president of the whole entire national organization, who also was like, I'm so glad that you came to us because we're going to make this pop. Then, Adelia, round about April of 2018, the Department of Government Efficiency came to the office of the major funder of the organization and cut much of the funding. So all of a sudden, the communications I was having with so many excited executives at this nonprofit was like, we don't even know if we're going to be open next year. So Godspeed, sis. So I literally, and this is, I'm going to be real. My most immediate supervisor really wanted to keep me on and kept trying to have conversations. And up until the day I got on the plane, literally 2 days before my plane left, 10 people got laid off at this organization, 5 were in my department. So I managed to continue this work for the first maybe 5 or 6 weeks I was in Portugal. And then eventually what I knew was going to happen was my supervisor saying, if things change, we have reversed some of the course of this demon's actions, but we're still waiting for the money to trickle down, because he's smart and he knew what he was doing. He knew he was going to hold a lot of stuff, even though what he did was illegal, right? So we basically live your best life. And if we can revisit this, we'll try to give you at least some freelance work. So I came here as a remote employee. And as you know, I do freelance writing and content creation. I also do a little curriculum development since I was trained as an educator. And when I moved abroad before, I was taking contracts in international schools teaching. So I came here with that and some freelance work. But for about a full month, I was legitimately unemployed in Lisbon. I have been smart enough over my working life to put money aside and to save. So I was never at all frightened that I would end up homeless. I had enough to exist. And even if I didn't find anything for the rest of this year, I would be fine. Since then, I have gone back to teaching in the international school here in Lisbon, Portugal, and have been in conversation with a couple of other organizations in nonprofit world, in the nonprofit sector that I was in full-time back in New York. And I'm having conversations with decision makers about doing contract, freelance, training, creating training materials and doing virtual trainings from them that hopefully will come to fruition in the next probably few months. So My main source of income, so I don't have to live off my savings for too much longer, is now teaching. And I must say, being paid in euros is a godsend. This is what they say the universe always knows to do, right? Because that's one thing that I'm gonna be real about too. The demon has done a lot. Leaving the U.S. don't really like shield you from some stuff. So the USD was already getting his ass beat last year when I was here on my scouting mission. But since this fool has enacted all of these policies that gonna make America great, whenever I transferred money from my US account to my Portuguese account, I had to go take a nap. I was like, oh Lord Jesus.
Yes. People forget, or I'm not going to say people. This is very specific to US Americans. We forget how interconnected the world is, and it's mostly our doing. But we still have this kind of isolationist. We are on our own continent. We're away from everybody. But we've created this system that even though physically getting out of the US, that does not shield you completely from the nonsense that is happening there.
Indeed, it does not. Like, you don't feel the weight on your shoulders as much because you're not necessarily in the country. But if you're still in touch with your loved ones back at home, and then you see the repercussions of administrative policies and how unfortunately we are the world leaders. Like, fascism is trending here in Portugal too. Their extreme right has made some great grounds since the last election too, and they're reacting to it, in my humble opinion, the way we reacted to this demon back in 2016. There's lots of, it's not as bad as it looks. No one ever take them seriously. The good people will prevail. And I'm like, all right.
If you have studied history, you know better than that.
And you have to
Of
study
all
it.
places.
You just read your seventh grade textbook. You ain't got to be a historian. You ain't got to study that deep. Just read your seventh grade textbook, and that you should know.
Yeah. That I'm probably going to cut this part out, but you were on a D8 visa, which is digital nomad, which is intended for your income to be outside of Portugal, but you have permission to work in Portugal.
Yes, you can keep it in because, and again,
Okay.
I'm a practicing Buddhist. I know everybody have different faith that they rely on. So I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and I believe that ultimately my life is not just adjacent to the universe, it is the universe. So when I create causes, the effects have already been registered. And can I tell you that this timeline of my supervisor saying, sis, I'm sorry, Godspeed, I'm glad you got money saved because I don't know what else to do, right? The timeline from that to having so many freelance contract opportunities be dangled in my face and then fall to the wayside and go nowhere. To literally one of the women I met here saying, oh, our school had a last minute faculty change. Somebody's going on paternity leave. This other lady got stuck in the U.S. with some family stuff. If you're looking, girl, send me your CV. We can get you in. The timeline from that was amazing. You cannot qualify to work off of the Portuguese economy until you become a temporary resident and you get your temporary residency card. I went for my temporary residency card appointment on August 26th, on August 22nd. By the time I had been told by this woman I met here, send me your CV, had an interview with her immediately like, oh my God, we are so lucky. Please come. Can you come today? To signing a contract, my temporary residency card came in that 2-week period.
Look, I know I have heard the stories about Portuguese bureaucracy and the number of people waiting to get their cards. So the
Last
universe
night,
is unfolding as it should.
Last night, I had one of those people here in my apartment where I had too much wine and too much cheese and too much cake. And she's not British Nigerian. Sis been here for 18 months and is like, I have no idea when my appointment even going to be given. I'm really here illegally. My DA visa expired a year ago. And I heard so many horror stories of people trying to get it renewed, and they've been basically expired for 2 years trying to get an appointment just with immigration to go and apply for the temporary. Yes, it was, again, the universe was universing. It was an amazing, like almost like made up timeline. Yeah, because you're right. The G8 visa requires income from somewhere else. And if I hadn't gotten my official residency card, I wouldn't have been able to qualify to work at this institution.
And as a former international educator, I also know getting a job in Europe is hard because they don't want to do the work to get somebody outside of the EU a work permit. So the
Because it
fact
is
that
a
you were
lot. It's
already
a lot.
there and that you already were in the system, like all of that needed to be in place for in order for this to happen. So I
Absolutely.
am so thankful that it did come together.
Girl, you and me both.
Now, now you mentioned somebody you met while you were there. One of the big things that I hear from people who are looking to move abroad, and like you said, when you were doing your scouting trips, you kind of hit a lot of those countries that our community, that come up a lot in our community. And, I hear from clients that they are looking for a place where they can have community, where there are other Black Americans and that sort of thing. So what do you want to say about that part of being in Lisbon? Because it's well known. Let's call it what it is. It is well known, at least amongst our folks, that that's a place you can go, and you don't have to work very hard before you get a head nod or you see somebody.
Yeah. Um, Lisbon, especially because it is the capital city, the major city in Portugal, is incredibly. It's full of Black folk from all over the diaspora. It will not be difficult for you to plug in to Black women if you are a Black woman, to plug into Black families if you have young children. I have met all versions of that: single Black women, married women who have young children that they need to consider, retired women who have adult children, widows, young folk who are just like out here trying to find themselves. All of that. And also all of that from not just the United States, of course, European Black folk. And because Portugal has many former African colonies, like Mozambican Black folk, Cape Verdean Black folk, Angolan Black folk. I will say this: one of the things that's discussed fairly often here in Lisbon among the diaspora is something that I think a lot of Black Americans. I'm going to try to be diplomatic. Because I am a Black American, and that should make me more empathetic to this, but it actually annoys me. I think Black Americans need to prepare themselves for none of these other Black people owe you anything.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not going to go into too much detail because, as you know, the circle is small and you have an amazing platform. So if I get too specific, you may get a DM from somebody. So I would just say I had a conversation within my first few weeks here with a Black American man who essentially was feeling away because Africans weren't nice enough to him when he encountered them on the street.
Black Americans, and I have said this before, and I'm going to say it now, we've got to
Let it go!
understand and realize our Black experience is not
It's not the
everybody's.
And all of the markers that you have identified as a Black American as unity and Blackness, they're not obligated to see those as markers of unity and Blackness. They're not obligated to see the need to be unified with you because you are Black. That does not mean that they have anything against you. They are not required to give you the head nod because we as Black Americans have recognized that or decided that is the acknowledgement. They are not obligated to see any sort of commonality between you and them besides y'all both.
Because for a lot of them, there is none.
There
The
is
fact that we all
none.
happen to be Black is very minor. And again, it goes back to our experience being Black, and being Black in the United States is its own thing. There are some really great parts of that. There are also some fucked up ones. And we have to remember where we put race, or specifically Blackness, is not where everybody else puts it in their hierarchy of things.
Because they come from a different context where there is no need to place Blackness or race anywhere in a hierarchy, because they come from a place where everybody Black. So what's the point? Why is it special? Why does it need to have a category? Everybody is Black, you know? And so much so that we don't even think of it as being Black. The same way white folk probably don't think of whiteness very often, you know, in certain parts of the world. So I think what Black Americans need to bear in mind, even and especially when they are in African countries, is that you have, like, you go to these countries looking for other Black Americans for a reason, because culturally, and not just ethnically, culturally, nationality wise, there's a common shared experience. It is being with these community of people that make you feel less isolated, because you have common experiences. There's a familiarity there because of that. That same principle is why you will find not all Africans here are necessarily connected. You will go to Angolan spots and there will be Angolans there, community, and they'll be happy to see you. And if you talk to them like they're human beings and not potential Black friends, you might make friends with some of these people, right? But folks grouping up by country and the connection and commonality that comes with their cultural identity connected to their country is quite normal, and no one owes you an invitation to their cookout. They don't owe you that. And it's perfectly fine if you aren't terribly connected to every single Black person from a different culture. It could be perfectly fine that your core are other Black Americans and probably Black Brits, because if we're looking at similarity, there's probably more there than in other, especially in continental African experiences. It's perfectly fine if that is your core group and you are supportive of, you do your best to connect with them as a human level, on a human level, without making them required to validate your feelings. That's perfectly fine, and you will save yourself some peace. Because the man I talk to seems to not have any peace when he's in the company of non-American Blacks who don't make him feel like a brother.
We could talk about that all day. Okay? We really could. But we're not, but we could. Um so a lot of the ladies who work with me are single, or maybe they've got children, but the children are older, but primarily they are moving abroad solo. And um unlike somebody like me, who I am the introverted introvert. So, like, social events are not the top thing that I'm looking when I roll up in a place. That's not at the top of my list. Or like, oh well, let's get together. I got to do that my own way. But one of their concerns is, like, I moved to this place. Am I going to be able to make friends? What kind of friends? Rashida Dow and I often talk about, folks will be like, well, I only want to live around locals. And they kind of shun the idea of connecting with other foreigners there. And then there are some people who are like, I live in this gated community with these other people who are just like me, and I'm not really trying to be friendly with those other folks. So, can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been there as a solo Black woman who is 50?
Yes. I learned early on into this journey that if you are moving to even another city in your home country alone, you need to be as strategic and as intentional as you were in planning your move to this new city, if it's in this new country, especially, you have to be that intentional and committed to the building of a community. My experience in Portugal has been I came here very clear that this will likely be my forever home. So I need to be even more committed to pouring into people who I generally like, not just people I'm meeting at events. Because as you know, when you type in Facebook, Black people in blank, and you join a Facebook group several times a week. There's a meetup. We playing spades on Wednesday. Every Thursday we got a
I
brunch
will
that we're
say we're not like that in Mexico City, and
really.
it annoys some people. I happen to be the admin, one of the admins for the Brothers and Sisters of Mexico City, and the number of folks, their first post is, "I just want to know, are there any meetups?" Blah blah blah, and anybody is free to create a meetup, but like
It's not just gonna be y'all.
as a
It's not.
structured, regularly occurring thing, we don't do that.
That is quite unusual because I've been in a whole bunch
Yes.
of countries and I'm still in a whole bunch of different groups. And wow, that is. But listen, they're always in as an outlier, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's easy to find regular meetups for your identity. If you're a Black person, that's the major one. But also, I'm in a group now just for women, international women who are in Lisbon to like go to picnics in the beach together, right? It's easy to go to these events and assume that the people you keep seeing at these events are your friends, and they're not. They could potentially be your people, but they're just folks you see at events. So you truly have to be committed to being intentional and strategic and going regularly to something. I mean, you have to leave your home. You will have to commit to going out to some regular thing.
Already, I'm out.
Dana's like, okay,
I'm
bye.
joking. I'm joking, but I'm also not. But I hear you. I hear you.
You're gonna have to be committed to that. And also, I think this is difficult for a lot of women, particularly women who, in my humble opinion, are reluctantly single for whatever reason. You have to go to these events and meet people the same way we're taught as women to get a man to choose us for marriage. How are we supposed to put all this headspace into it and give him another chance? Maybe that first date was just not so great because he had a bad day, so let's give him another chance. You know, the same way we're conditioned to pour all of that into romantic partnership, you have to reframe your thinking to give as much grace and as much time, as much chance to develop into the one or two ladies who you're meeting at these events, right? So, like I said, I've been here. My plane landed May 22nd. So that's almost like 4 months, right? I've been here
Okay.
almost 4 months. And last night, there were 6 people in my home on this sofa for 4 hours drinking wine and eating cheese with me. And these were 6 people who, we're not best friends, of course, because it's only been 4 months. But these were 6 people who I met at going out to stuff because Lisbon is a city. If I was younger, I'd be at more of this shit. But I like being home and in my bed and moisturize and shower by midnight. So I miss a lot of stuff. But there's always something popping off. Even for the middle-aged crowd, they're always popping off. So in the events I've been to, going out to meeting people, these 6 people are people I generally had a connection with. Like I thought they were cool. We saw the world similarly enough. They also came from slightly different backgrounds, and we had a vibe. So I intentionally over these last 4 months chase them in a way that I'm encouraged to do to find a husband. I followed up with one of the women who I met at like some sort of brunch for like, you know, women new to Lisbon to come and meet other women. So I talked to one of these ladies, and she was cool. She was dope. I like that she was in her 30s because I don't want to be around people all the same age as me. In some of the
That part.
conversation,
We need to cultivate a circle with multiple age groups in it. My roommate is 16 years younger than me, and that's been one of my best moves right there.
And people say that the young person gets something out of it, but I really do feel I gained so much as an older woman. And I forgot exactly what our conversation was about at this little dinner we met at. But if it was organic, and I was like, oh, I like the way she thinks, and I can see that she's a cool lady. So I got her information before the evening was done, and then I did not wait for her to reach out to me. I hit her up and said, you want to go have a drink or do X, Y, and Z? And at one point, she had to like cancel or reschedule. And because I'm committed to the circle of care, as we're trained to be only to finding romantic partners. So I gave her some grace. I was like, okay, she had to cancel. That's kind of messed up because I'm looking forward to hanging with her. But let me just try her again. Now, if she cancels again, I'm moving on. But let me give her some grace. And I'm not going to wait for her to then reschedule. I'm intentional and committed to having a community here. So I'm going to reach out to her in an appropriate time and see if she's open to it, right? And I did that with each of the people who were here last night in my home because I generally thought they were good people. And I was able to talk myself out of, when people say something as you're getting to know them that makes you think negatively of them, I had to retrain myself not to think, because one bad thing that they said or one not so great quality, like just give them a chance and just see where it goes. So I feel like if you're moving to a new city, a new country, as a woman who is unpartnered, who lives alone, let's just say that, and you want to be able to have a circle of care, not immediately, but eventually in another year or two, you're like, these are the people I know if I'm having a really messed up day and I'm not at my best, I'm vulnerable enough to be able to call them and go out with them and be honest with them about how I'm feeling, and they will pour into me. If you want to eventually have that, you need to commit to an intentional plan to find those people and then to pour into them. And that involves follow-up, that involves vulnerability, that involves discomfort at some level. It involves having to leave some people where you found them, because you're like, the more I get to know you, I'm gonna have to say no.
You ain't my people. You ain't my people. And I will say that.
But no, you're not.
But you're not. And that doesn't mean I think you are a horrible person, but I am curating this space. And it's very obvious you are not my people. So I'm going to leave the door for you.
Yeah, like peace be unto you.
I'm so glad you said all that, because somebody might hear like, oh, you had these women over, or these women came over, and like think that sort of thing just happens out of thin air.
No, baby. No, it does not. And I think in many ways, you have to do more because, respectfully, women require more.
We do, because we are far more complex than men.
They require more. And again, it is my humble belief, I don't know how controversial this is to say, it is my humble belief as a heterosexual woman who romantically partners with men, the path to not getting the care you truly need when you are in a new country by yourself, the path to that is focusing on trying to find a babe. And it actually ends with finding a babe. If you, as a woman who is not romantically linked, come to a country, and again, if this is what you want to do and your prerogative, go ahead, do you, boo-boo. I will chant for you to find Boaz. But if you come to a country and you focus and center on that, I guarantee, even when you get him, you're going to be lonely as hell, because the kind of care that a woman needs, the kind of protection she needs, comes from not having to perform womanhood to get it. And if you are a straight girl, you're going to have to perform womanhood at some level. Yes, even the good ones who wear the feminist shirt. You will have to perform womanhood at some level to get that reciprocal care from even one of the good men, right? So if your only focus is on that, and that's what you end up with most, you are not getting real care. You may get a good boyfriend, a good man, but you're not getting real care, respectfully.
Oh my gosh, you just said so much right there. So much. I don't even know where to
that's
start.
what you looking for, girl. I mean, I'm dating somebody now. He's a lovely dude. I did not center finding him. And I'm still even more clear. There's a level of performance when you are a straight girl dating only men. No, don't let
Yes.
nobody lie to you and tell you they ain't.
The only time in my life I can ever recall being lonely is when I was married for 20 years. Okay.
Girl, I have the number of women who have told me that shit.
And that's what I know. That's what I know. Um, you were talking about, this is a firm belief of mine as well, that, and we do this because this is the society we've been programmed in and conditioned in, that the ultimate, when it comes to relationships, is a romantic relationship. And that's your primary goal. And that's the relationship you put the work into. And I'm pretty sure we've all seen the TikToks or whatever when they talk to the lady who works in hospice and she tells you, you want to know who dies alone? Is men. The women have other women who show up for them, who, it's often not their children. It is their female friends. So this idea that the ultimate relationship is a romantic one is causing us so much hurt and pain. And
And
go
it
ahead.
is absolutely at the foundation of this loneliness epidemic in America. It's not dating apps. It's not marriage. It's not lasting. It's the hierarchy on which we place romantic relationships, which thus causes us not to reframe how we can pour in and to create fictive kin, to create a circle of care, to make that romantic partner not the top of the pedestal, but make the whole entire care a circle, and he is one spot on that circle. So
Absolutely.
folks are just like, oh, if the marriage rate and the birth rate is decreasing, at the same time there's a loneliness crisis. That has to be connected. It is. The connection is we have turned romantic partnership into a deity, and don't nobody know or invest as much in pouring into other interpersonal relationships. And if you are a woman, because we have not done enough to really expect of men and give them some sort of tool to develop their own emotional care, to be able to pour into themselves and their homeboys the way women have for centuries. When you partner with these men, you end up giving all of that to them. And even if
I
they
was going to
want
say that's
to,
not a partnership. You don't partner with someone who can't do that. We can call it that, but that ain't what it is.
exactly,
Um,
you don't get a chance to develop a circle of care when the rigidity of romantic partnership is your go-to and the main source of care you get. Again, even if
and
you are married to a wonderful man who is evolved and emotionally mature, the structure of what we have done to deify these.
exactly. And also, it's actually putting unbe incredibly unrealistic expectations on that romantic relationship if you are expecting this. And I can't talk to the ladies who date ladies because that is not my experience, but you have been told that you are going to find this one person who is going to complete you and they're going to be this and that, and this is some man who was raised in a completely different household from you with different values, all of that. And y'all been grown folks, and now you putting your lives together and you're like, all of a sudden magically all of this is going to click and it's going to be perfect. That is asking an incredible amount of someone. That so
Impossible.
that's my belief on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're talking about romantic versus platonic. We are, as a society, we are not putting platonic relationships, which actually probably are above romantic ones,
That's where
because
you get the most non-performative care, or the care that you get without being attached to some sort of performative, the less strings attached. Mm-hmm.
yes. And you said something about having to chase, or, like, basically you were kind of flipping the switch here. Basically, acting as if it was a romantic relationship and moving the way the man is supposed to, which I find really interesting because of this whole dynamic we've been talking about. Women have always been taught you don't chase, you get chased. So if you're trying to connect and build female friendships and community, but you like, I ain't chasing nobody. And everybody's sitting around like, oh no, she just gonna have to find me. What you doing?
You killing me. Because I know women, I've heard women say almost exactly that in the work that I do to try to coach women through how to do this. I get that some women like just, I'm an extrovert. I'm very much out and being with people. And some people who aren't like that struggle with it. And it's funny because even when they don't say that, that is kind of the mentality. And it's interesting to me because when I say chase, listen, I don't care if it's boo or potential bestie. You shouldn't be forcing nobody to hang with you. If they're not returning calls, if they waiting 2 days to return a text, if they didn't cancel once or twice with no, I'm sorry, let me take you out, then leave the people where you found them, regardless if
But
it's a friend or a
like
bae.
you said, they will give a man grace that they will never give a woman. How
And
many times have we seen these TikToks? Well, I invited these people to my birthday party and nobody came, so I'm not friends with none of them hoes no more. But if that man did that, oh, he didn't buy me nothing for my birthday, but it's okay because he was working hard this week. Like that's
he
the
didn't
part that I'm hung up on.
exactly. And what I find is when you lead with, I value connections with a core group of women who I am going to get care from and who I am going to care for. You, in the way I parallel it to in pursuit of a romantic relationship or when you fall in love romantically, it requires the same level of actions, the same type of action. So, for instance, one of the friends who was at my apartment last night, for many reasons, this is the younger woman. One of the things that attracted me to her and why I wanted her in my sort of circle is I could sense that there was something that she was struggling with and that in many ways she felt alone. Even though when we met, she was surrounded by cool women. She's always out doing stuff. She is originally from here, so she has a core group, but she's always out. There was something about her, I was like, she's a good person, but she needs people in her life. I made a point to when we would go on our little friendship dates to listen to what this woman had to say. We talk about casual, non-important stuff, pop culture, and then sometimes about life in Lisbon. And then I would go into other stuff. She's also heterosexual, so about dating and what her desires, all of that stuff. And so certain themes kept coming up when I talked to this young woman. When she canceled, we were supposed to go out and see some show because Lisbon has a dope live music scene. I can tell you, not since I lived in New Orleans have I been in a city where you can just walk in almost anywhere and some random person is singing and they like blowing the house down and they got live instruments. So we were supposed to go to this, one of my favorite venues here to see a show. And literally the day before she was like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And I sensed she was having some sort of depressive moment, but she didn't want to say that. And I didn't say either, because again, just like a romantic relationship, you can't be shooting a gun. Like after 3 months, you won't move in or tell me your deepest, darkest secret. So I didn't ask nothing, but I actually put in my calendar on this date, text her again and make it a, hey girl, what's up? Kind of thing. And then eventually
Not bringing up the fact you canceled on me, none of that.
and then when I got myself together to like invite people over, I was like them going back to this thing. And it just so happened that last night she was the first one to come over and she told me what she was going through. She was here about 20 minutes before the other person arrived. And again, I didn't make any questions. We were just chit-chatting. And through that, it came up. And I literally this morning, when I chanted for her to overcome this thing. And it was very layered, very heavy. And if I were a 33-year-old woman, I would struggle with it too. Right? So it's that kind of care. It is listening to this person and thinking about how can I be of support to them without asking anything of her. She may never be able to be there for me in the same way, but that is not what a friendship is based on. Either I'm going to give her this care in my capacity or I'm not. So it's that kind of thing when you're letting your headspace be filled with not just how can we hang out and have fun, but how can I pour into her and give her care because she's Black. She is a Black Portuguese woman. Give her care that a young Black woman in today's world would need. Period. Full stop. And I'm not going to do it with everybody. I've met other Black women who probably have some trauma, and I have chosen not to pour into them for whatever reason.
Because again, you are curating the circle. There is something about this particular woman that you're like, I would like her to be in this circle, but that also means you gotta be, if she gonna be in your circle or y'all gonna hang with each other like that, you've got to, it comes down to, they talk about everybody want a village, but nobody wants to be a villager. Like, part of being the villager is you see sis got something going on, and yes, you've got to pour a little bit, and she may never be able to return that in that same way, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also what I would also say, you mentioned it, and I want to sort of really, really put a pin and make it bigger, your point. Realizing and leaning into you don't have the capacity to do that for everybody. So you should choose wisely.
That part.
And you should not lead women on to make them think you're going to have that capacity for them and then leave them hanging, because that's effed up too. So you don't have the capacity to still run your own life, to do that for everybody. So to choose, for whatever reason you choose them, be very clear on why you're choosing to do this for this person and why you need these 3 or 4 people in your life, and to only do that for them. Like I say to women all the time, be cool with every woman you meet, especially every Black woman you meet, even the ones who you don't necessarily like. Be cool with them because they are you. I don't care how much you don't want to believe that. That Black woman is you. So when you fight with her, you fight with yourself. So be cool with her, but only take the 3 or 4 who you truly have a genuine connection with and pour into them and give them that within your capacity. Like if y'all send a GoFundMe because some Black lady here is struggling, I'm going to contribute. I'm not coming to her house to sit with her and read no Bible verses. I'm not even going to follow up to see if she got the money. I'm just going to go ahead on and put the money in the account. I'm going to do, that's all I'm going to do, right? Because if you're a Black lady, you're not going to be out here homeless in these broad streets on my watch, right? So it's be cool with literally every single woman, especially if she's Black. But you pour into and you give that capacity to the ones who genuinely are someone you're connected with and you have chosen for whatever reason to be in your community of care.
2 things. Your use of the word chosen, because in my other professional work, we host retreats for women in femmes, and we talk about building community and that sort of thing. And a lot of, and because something I hear a lot, and we hear a lot doing that work with Reclaim, is that, oh, it's so hard to make friends in my 40s, in my 30s, whatever. If you think about the connections in the community you had as a child, most of that was based off of proximity. And what you're talking about is choosing, and you're talking about a level of intentionality. I don't think most of us are readily equipped to do that.
Very well said. And I will be honest, sometimes because I am who I am, I downplay that or underestimate that, right? Because I'm like, why would you not? If you want people, then you go out and you find people. Like, why? Like, you wanted a master's degree, so you went out and you got like, and I will admit that is a blind spot on my. It's one of the reasons why I started this new venture of coaching women through this, because I realized, like, people, even the friends who were here last night were surprised. Like, this many people? Like, I've been here 4 years. I know 2 people. And like, know them. Like, y'all talking about stuff y'all did before, about their mama. Like, so, and I think I always underestimate that for people, for a lot of people, that's difficult in many ways.
So tell us about this coaching, because again, like I said, this, what we're talking about here, in order, because you got to have community no matter where you are. But when you're talking about moving to another country, for all the reasons we've discussed here, that you can't just be this silo. And this is, American culture itself does not lend itself to the type of intentionality we're talking about. So not having this, or not being like super easy and comfortable with doing this, is not a knock on anybody. It's just not something we've been equipped to do. So that's why I want you to talk about that.
Yes. One of the things I do is, first of all, I created a digital product, which is the cheap, I don't know, well, it is cheap, easy, accessible version where I give women steps on how to
Do not say cheap. It is accessible. It is
You're
not
right,
cheap.
that's better. The more accessible, quick, here are the 3 steps, here are 3 things to remember, and a little bit of detail about what you can expect in each step, right? So there is this digital product where I give you the plan, I remind you about being intentional. And for women who, for the most part, they don't feel so gun shy about it. They just need something laid out like you lay out a math problem. That can be enough. So that's accessible. It's only $6.50 on my website. But there's also for women who the last time they made a friend, this is how they made the friend. They were in their dorm room, minding their business. And someone walked in and said, "Girl, we going to Atlanta. You want to ride with us?" My cousin said we can stay with her. And they just like, cool. And they put some stuff in a duffel bag. And they got in the car. And in that 8-hour ride, they became friends. Like, that's my ride dog. Now, 20 years later, that friend lives across the country. She got 3 kids. And y'all maybe text every few months. And now you like, oh, dang. I could use some my wait and exhale crew, you know? But she don't know how she did that, because one of the things you mentioned about when you're younger, a lot of the friends or proximity. Also, we don't, when the research has shown this, up until you leave college, the reason why it's easy to make friends is because there's forced interaction in a way that's helpful. Y'all all living in this dorm. The dorm has these activities that y'all roll your eyes at and say it's corny, but y'all go to them activities, and then you meet people. Life is much simpler. Somebody got a car. You won't go to Freaknik. You get in the car with the people going to Freaknik. And because you don't know yourself that well, much like when you make these choices in a romantic relationship, you end up being friends with people who really, y'all both sort of wet cement. So there's no reason for y'all not to be friends. So you're often friends with people who, once that situation in and y'all leave college, you're like, oh shit, that was holding us together, right? So when you are in your 40s, I think it's a great benefit to be able to be more intentional and to reach out and choose places, events that are going to make you more successful at meeting women who truly are your fit, right? So one of the things I do for women who are like, I do value other women, I do want friends, but even this guy, like step 2, I have 20 questions. Like, how do I talk to strangers? Like, because in step 2, I say one of the things you do is have real conversations. Like, what does that even mean? How do you have a real conversation with someone you just met at this brunch for Black ladies in Lisbon, right? So I coach women through, let's make a plan. Let's put up let's set a calendar for when you're going to go to certain things, what type of woman you're going to look for, and how you're going to continue that conversation. Like, what are real things that you can say, and what are pitfalls that you can avoid when you start meeting people? Because like I said, most people are friendly and nice. It's been my experience. No one's ever really rude when you start meeting people. But when you're looking for then wanting to go deeper and to get into depth, how do you avoid pitfalls of people who you really don't really want in your life and you leading them on because either you feel bad or you are lonely and don't want to not have a friend in your life, so you leave these people on, although you know they're not a good match for you, right? So how to avoid that? So I actually work with women and coach them through how to set goals and how to be vulnerable in many ways. So I think that's what it all comes down to, this level of vulnerability that we don't talk about in making connections with friends, with any human beings, but particularly with friends, that there's a possibility of being rejected. There's a possibility of ending, of realizing that you've made this connection with somebody who's not very nice. And then what do you do? So there's a vulnerability involved in that. And I think women can need just as much help accessing that with platonic friendships as they do sometimes with romantic relationships.
I would say even more
Mm-hmm.
because and I'm not saying this to take a shot at anybody. I think you were talking about the last decade for you. The last decade for me has really been about like questioning and reevaluating and interrogating all of these things I have been taught. Like this is it. This is how it goes. And when I hear women talk about like, well, I didn't have any female friends because you know how women are, or I only have surface level, the system has kind of taught you that like women are, they're your rival, they're competition,
For the
but
attention of men.
yeah, like first of all, we need to interrogate why a system would have us pitted against each other, and the reasoning for that. And so it's often hard if that's where you're coming from. This idea of, then yes, making a friend, building community. I love how you call it a circle of care, because that's what we're here for, and that's what we're here to give. And to me, that sounds like so tapped into our humanity in a way that we're not taught to be. So if you're coming from that place, you can very much feel like, these kind of women, X, Y, and Z, but you've never, I would bet, you've never been this intentional and really thought about, well, what kind of woman do I want around me?
Mm-hmm.
What is she like? What does she believe? Because if you're
And
if
that
you're
goes
that
beyond, exactly. That goes beyond. Do we like doing the same things? At the end of the day, once you hit 50, we all like doing the same things. We like being home by midnight. We like moisturizing. We like having
part,
brunch. We all like the same shit. It's not that diverse when it comes to activities.
I think it is being that kind of intentional. Okay. I just got back from Scotland. We were at this lingerie sewing retreat my roommate went to, and something came up, and she was like, "Isn't that why you did X, Y, and Z?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I had a moment, and she was like, "Yeah, like you were trying to have job security." I was like, "I've never done a strategic thing in my life." And when I said that, I thought about like that man I married. There was no strategy there. There was no plan. How I
But
ended up in my
listen, you were
career.
also 19. So let's just be fair with the
Yes.
marriage. You didn't
Okay.
have a fully developed frontal lobe like that. I don't think that should count. You
Facts.
can count that.
Facts. But it, as I was saying this, I was like, that's wild that I have been on this earth for 50 years and just been flying by the seat of my pants, no strategy. Because I don't want to say a plan, but like if I'm not strategic, then I can't be shocked when I get like when I pull my net in and I got some shit I wasn't counting on. You know what I'm saying?
Indeed. Indeed.
So I want any woman watching this, and like you might hear what Keturah is talking about, and that might sound hard, and that's okay because this is not the way we have been moving through life. This is
Mm.
why you download her guide, and maybe your situation is such that you could really use some help here. I made myself a note. I was like, you're kind of like a friendship dating coach.
Indeed, I am. And you know what, Adelia, it took me a while to even see this. Literally, the reason why I decided to expand this in my creative way of being in my creative endeavors is because so many people were surprised this time around in my move at how I had community. And that even when I was scouting out this place last year, that I was thinking about community the same way I was thinking about I want to live in this neighborhood. I want to make sure that I can have access to this amount of income. I want to, like, I remember thinking about going to events last year in the Black people community and meeting two particular Black women who I was like, I'm going to put them on WhatsApp. I'm going to keep in touch with them. And when I started to give my family contact information of people I wasn't close with yet, but in case I do disappear, you might can. I was very intentional in that, and people commenting this time around, wow. And it occurred to me, I've done that even when I was new at this. When I went to Rwanda 10 years ago, that was a part of my very intention. I'm going to go to this event. Oh, I like Donna Lee. Let me keep up with Donna Lee. And then when I left Rwanda, out of all the people I met, Donna Lee is the one who I feel the most connected to. So even years later, when she's been in 4 different countries now, I'm back in another continent, and we still are in contact. And I think I didn't realize that that is my thing, that I have a skill set in this that, like you were just saying before, we aren't necessarily conditioned or trained to have. And I am a friendship coach. I am a community building coach because I have done it all of my life, but it's just become much more crucial and I guess much more enhanced because of moving alone. I've done it in a very I've gone hardcore on it in the last 10 years.
We've kind of exhausted my list of questions here. And I do realize you got to get ready for work tomorrow and you got to do all those things. So I'm not going to hold you here super long. But if people want more information about your guide or your services, where do they get that?
You can go right to KeturahKendrick.com, my website. If you just want to get the guidebook, it's right there on the homepage. You can go ahead on and download it. If you download it and you still need more intentional help, you can reach out to me. There's information in the guidebook, and we can do a consultation and talk from there about what you need. Because it could be that you just need, can you give me some sentence starters for step 2? It could be that you haven't even started your journey of moving, whether it's abroad or just another city, but you have, like the questions you have now, you have some specific questions about how difficult will it be? What should I keep in mind? And how can I put that on my list of things to plan for when I move, even to Houston from Atlanta, but KeturahKendrick.com, everything you need is there. If it's just the guidebook, take it, use it, be intentional. If you need more strategic help from me, I'm reachable again through my website, KeturahKendrick.com.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you reiterated that. And what we're talking about here is not uniquely an issue when you move abroad. This is a everybody, everywhere kind of situation.
You don't have to move.
I think,
Yeah, exactly. It's being midlife and just realizing my circle has shrank, and I don't remember how I made these friends to begin with. I don't know how to do that because the last time I made a friend, she came in my room. It was like, we go in Atlanta. That's how we became friends.
I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Keturah. As you could tell, I absolutely did. Every time I talk to her, there is always some incredible gem being dropped. Like, she's just an incredible woman. I'm curious. Let me know in the in the chat. Let me know in the chat your favorite part of this conversation. If you are, a woman we talked about who finds herself needing a little bit of extra help or strategy, creating your circle of care, building and filling out your community, be sure to go to her website, KeturahKendrick.com, and to grab her community building guide. If she's got a newsletter or whatever, sign up for that, because I'm telling you, she always has something incredible to say. Thank you for watching, because I know this was a little long. If you are not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, what you waiting on? And if you're not signed up for my email list, that way you find out about conversations like this or events or new things I'm doing or whatever, do that as well. There is a link in the description of this video.